Budget 2019 that was tabled in Parliament by Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng today saw the Pakatan Harapan government revealing detailed measures on how it intends to affect policy changes that will bring overall betterment to the general populace. The budget is the second policy statement for the new government after the review of the 11th Malaysia Plan, which contains the broad blueprint of what the government wants to do until the year 2020. Good evening. I'm Adrian Seed and welcome to a special edition of Budget 2019 right here on News on 2. Now, the 11th Malaysia Plan spoke about improving governance, the well-being of the people, having inclusive development, pursuing a balanced regional development, empowering human capital, and also strengthening economic growth. Joining me in the studio to give us some highlights with regards to the Budget 2019 is my colleague Mohana Priya. Mohana, over to you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Now, the 2019 budget tabled by Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng mainly focused on institutional reforms, people's well-being and the promotion of entrepreneurial culture to recapture Malaysia's economic tiger status. Now, the Finance Minister said the 2019 budget would put Malaysia in a stronger position and to ensure the prosperity of the people and future generations. According to Lim, the main weaknesses of the previous government's management of the country's macroeconomy was the mismanagement of public funds. Most of all, the 50 billion ringgit 1MDB scandal, as chronicled in the book Billion Dollar Whale.
Reformasi institusi adalah perlu untuk meningkatkan ketulusan disiplin fiskal yang bukan sahaja dapat mengelak berulangnya salah laku, tetapi dapat memastikan kestabilan makroekonomi dan kemampanan pertumbuhan ekonomi.
Now, according to Lim, as part of the government's efforts to reform the financial institution, it has laid 3 strategies to achieve this. They are strengthening fiscal management, restructuring and rationalizing the government's debts, and increase government's revenue.
Kerajaan Persekutuan telah menstruktur semula pendekatan belanjawan melalui zero-based budgeting, iaitu sistem belanjawan berasaskan sifar belanjawan. Pendekatan ini meningkatkan keberkesanan, kecekapan dan penjimatan kerana perbelanjaan dibuat melalui penilaian matlamat peruntukan dan bukannya berdasarkan perbelanjaan tahun lalu. Dan semua perbelanjaan yang menurut juri bicara akan dirancang dari sifar.
Now, the government will also table the Fiscal Responsibility Act in 2021 to avoid uncontrolled expenditure, which would lead to big debts. The Acquisition Act next year to better manage the acquisition process and ensure a more open competition. To ensure debts and liabilities are managed comprehensively, the government will also implement the accrued accounting system to replace cash-based accounting. And for the past decade, the federal government had been depending on the government's guarantee, which were not quite transparent to cover the government's revenue.
Pada asasnya, defisit belanjawan yang diumumkan dan telah dicapai pada tahun-tahun sebelum ini tidak menggambarkan defisit sebenar. Sehubungan itu, walaupun kerajaan telah berusaha sebaik mungkin untuk mengurangkan kos dan menunda perbelanjaan tidak kritikal, adalah tidak realistik untuk mencapai sasaran defisit 2.8% pada 2018, melainkan kerajaan meneruskan amalan terdahulu dengan menyuruh perbelanjaan secara off-balance sheet.
Lim said for the next 3 years, the Pakatan Harapan government is committed to implement a fiscal consolidation measure to reduce the country's deficit to 3.4% from the GDP in 2019 to 3% in 2020 and 2.8% in 2021.
Now, in the studio with us today is Professor Dr. Raja Rasia, Distinguished Professor of International Development at the Asia-Europe Institute, University of Malaya. Professor Dr. Raja, thank you very much for joining us once again.
You're welcome.
Now, we would like to begin with your thoughts about the government's revenue to begin with. That's a huge conversation for us in Budget 2019. The government's revenue for this year going into 2019 will decline to 21 billion ringgit following the reinstatement of the sales and services tax. that I think was implemented September the 1st of 2018 this year to replace GST. What impact will this have to our revenue as a nation in the long run?
The way the finance minister presented 2019 budget suggests to me that it would not have that much of an impact in deleterious sense, simply because despite the fact that we ended up discovering the colossal debt that we eventually faced, and we don't really know if we got to the bottom of the whole thing, but I think the fact that he has tried to remove any form of wastage and at the same time and this is why I think he calls and takes it from the review of the 11th Malaysia Plan, to have institutional reforms. Make it transparent, make sure the governance is clear, tight at the same time, targeted at the right sectors. One, to take care of those people he classifies as B40.
That's right.
And the next is to see that we end up promoting technical change to Industry 4.0 and so on. So I don't really think that the fact that revenue has fallen to 21 billion ringgit, it will have that much of an impact, more than the debt itself.
More than the debt itself.
Yeah.
So having said what you just did, it was announced that the government expects gross domestic product, GDP, to grow by 4.9% in 2019, despite, Professor, the uncertainties of the global economy. What are your thoughts? This is obviously achievable in your opinion. What do you think?
The future is always uncertain. Of course, the fact that we're only projecting for 1 year, it's more certain than, say, if we're going to project it for the next 10 years. But my understanding is the fact that in his presentation, he took account, he was cognizant of the fact that you have this peso crisis unfolding, you have this the trade war between China and the US, what it would mean in relation to trade, how the global economy would slow down, including the OECD. I feel, because I haven't seen the details yet, I feel that those details would have been factored in. And taking that into account, the fact that they are reforming the economy to re-target investments to productive areas suggests to me that it's possible. 4.9 is not a miraculous sort of a growth rate. Yes.
Not miraculous.
Yeah.
Professor, the other thing to perhaps have a conversation about is if you look at social media, if you look at the street polls that most of our journalists and the crew are doing right now, and bringing us back some of the results. The other thing that seems to be on every rakyat's mind, right, is that the fact that the government will subsidize RON 95 petrol for those with cars, engine capacity 1,500cc and under, and those motorcycles with an engine capacity of 125cc and under. Now, since RON 95, we've had the same price of 2 ringgit and 20 cents for the longest time. How does this impact us, the consumers?
On the one hand, I can't really tell exactly what he's got in mind, because we only heard probably the icing. We haven't seen the entire cake yet. So I shall not generalize, except that I have concerns over this. In as much as I believe the attempt to subsidize the group below a certain income by way of looking at CC, it doesn't necessarily mean that the poor are the ones who will be riding or driving those things. But by and large, the bulk of them would do that. That's fine, I think. But the consequences of that could also mean that you are now subsidizing a fuel that we are trying to limit. We're trying to actually discourage people from using, which is really driven from fossil. That's one. Second, because the developed countries are largely banned, except for the US, coal, the use of coal, you have massive amount of coal. There's a glut in the global market. We are among the importers of coal. That gives me the feeling that in the long run, and that oil prices would go down. Not just because of that. Europe and Japan have actually prohibited the use of the internal combustion engine from 2040. All this actually means that we may have actually a glut. And what is the point of doing this?
Okay. A discussion that we'll probably have to continue after this. Professor, we're going to go back to Mohana Priya, who's got some stories for us. Mohana?
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Professor. Now, moving on to the people's well-being, which is the second focus of the budget. The government, through the cooperation with private insurance providers, will introduce a national health protection fund for families in the B40 category. Now, effective 1st January 2019, the scheme will offer free protection for 4 main types of critical diseases at a rate of up to 8,000 ringgit for treatment and a maximum of 14 days daily income replacement during treatment in hospital at a rate of ringgit 50 ringgit per day, or equivalent to 700 ringgit a year.
Kerajaan menghargai sumbangan Great Eastern Life Insurance atas persetujuan mencarum sebanyak 2 bilion ringgit ke dalam dana permulaan yang akan diuruskan oleh Bank Negara Malaysia. Kerajaan menjangkakan saiz dana akan berkembang dengan pelibatan syarikat insurans lain. Ini merupakan satu peralihan besar dalam usaha untuk mewujudkan jaringan keselamatan sosial yang komprehensif, merangkumi KWSP dan Perkeso
Bagilah peluang untuk Menteri menguraikan
perlindungan sosial yang lain.
Also, as hoped by those in the B40 group, the government will continue with the Bantuan Sara Hidup BSH aid, with improvements by way of more targeted assistance and depending on household size from January 2019.
Isi rumah berpendapatan bulanan RM2,000 dan ke bawah akan menerima bantuan berjumlah RM1,000. Isi rumah berpendapatan bulanan dari RM2,001 hingga RM3,000 akan menerima bantuan berjumlah RM750.
As an improvement, the government will also introduce an additional BSH of 120 ringgit for each child aged 18 and below, limited to 4 children, except children with special needs, where there is no limit on the age.
With us is Professor Dr. Raja Rasia, Distinguished Professor of International Development at the Asia-Europe Institute at University of Malaya. Now, the Finance Minister, Lim Guan Eng, made a comment, Professor, that the previous government administration secretly paid 7 billion ringgit of 1MDB's debt as of April 30th of 2018 this year. Now, however, at this point, the current government is still needing to service the loan, isn't it, and interest, as much as 43.9 billion ringgit to settle the 1MDB debts, with all the cost-cutting exercises that he's talked about in expenses that we're hoping to do, like cancelling some of the mega projects. He discussed that at the tabling of the budget. Do you think we can actually realize this, Prof?
I think a number of them it's possible, including the recent attempt by the AG to stop payments to this British company because of the fact that this entire program has involved corruption, fraud, and therefore, because it's fraud, the international agencies will likely respect that, the rule of law. Now, with regards to the big mega projects that we had agreed to, now I think there is an attempt, and Guan Eng, the YB Guan Eng actually presented some examples of how they actually bargain those prices down. It's really something interesting for us to know, because that's actually part of institutional reform. You can actually see the manifestation of it in actual savings. Now, where it involves a massive outlay in relation to what economic benefits it will bring, they've stopped. At least temporarily they stopped, the gas pipelines and so on to Sabah. So my own feeling is most of it probably would be realized. Whether it will be exhaustive in the current government being able to reach out to the entire globe to see where investments went, all these fraudulent investments went, I'm not sure about that. I can't be conjecturing on that, yeah.
Precisely. Now, the thing is, I just want to quickly discuss perhaps fiscal deficit very briefly. Now, our fiscal deficit in 2018 will eventually reach 3.7%. The increases, as you've mentioned, and as Yang Berhormat Minister Lim mentioned, was due to various expenditures. Now, this was committed by the previous administration. Generally, what are your thoughts? Are we going to be able to actually reduce the deficit at all?
My feeling is we need to look at the capacity to service more than the deficit itself. In that sort of sense, the fact that we are doing away with all these wasteful investments, at the same time we are doing away with corruption, this is dissipation of completely unproductive rents. Surely you will have savings from there. That's one avenue you can appropriate from. I'm basing it from the knowledge I have from his presentation. The second point we can see is he did not, I mean, in contrast to what many people had expected, following this discussion, what to expect from the budget. From your own TV, they had expected a freezing or contraction of the budget, which he didn't do. In fact, he increased the budget, except that because of the expenses endured by the previous government, because of the wastage there, much of it is going for management of the economy as opposed to development. Development budget has fallen from, I think, 54.9 billion to 54.7 billion.
Right.
But that's not much in that sense. But eventually, I would expect that to rise.
So, having said that, I'm trying to figure out, the government also mentioned about minimum wage. It has been a big discussion for us throughout the week since Monday. We've had talk shows on that. Minimum wage is being set at 1,100 ringgit. Professor, do we have the money for it?
This is a hot debate. If you ask most employers, they are unlikely to support that. In fact, I've actually faced them. My own feeling is the strategy we followed before may not be the right one. I mean, this is not the previous government itself for a long time in keeping wages down. But that, again, was also a consequence of the kind of education policies we followed. And you mentioned earlier in our pre-discussion about TVET, technical vocational education training. In other words, did we really see that our labor force was exposed to contemporaneous skills, the most state-of-the-art skills? That if we had breached that, I think this wouldn't be a problem. The reason is...
We won't be talking about this right now.
Exactly. Okay. You have two sides of the debate, one of which talks about performance-based wages, the firms. If you don't perform, you don't get a bonus. If you don't perform, you don't have a pay rise. Efficiency wages, the guys who believe that if workers need to be trained, there will be costs involved. Workers have to be motivated to perform better. There must be rewards. This is two sides of the same thing. It's a question of what you do. Eventually, if you don't raise wages, whatever the Korean government did in the 70s, wages actually rose quite rapidly in Korea.
Okay. Professor, we're going to go back to Mohana because I think she's got something to do with, she's got something to say about the cultivation of the culture of entrepreneurship. Mohana?
Yes, I do. Speaking about jobs, Professor, now the budget's 2019's third crucial focus aims to cultivate the culture of entrepreneurship in the country to assist Malaysians in realizing their full potential. And therefore, the government's plans to create an economic ecosystem that can spur the country's economic growth by developing further the new economy and the digital economy.
Model negara keusahawanan menggunakan kerjasama 4P. 4P. Public, private, professional and people. Atau sektor awam, sektor swasta, golongan profesional dan rakyat. Untuk membangun dan mengurus sesuatu projek. Projek tersebut akan dibiayai bersama oleh keempat pihak. Tetapi ia akan diuruskan oleh pihak swasta atau profesional yang bertanggungjawab kepada pihak kerajaan atau rakyat.
Now mentioned under its 9th strategy, initiating new economic power, the government has also ensured that Malaysian entrepreneurs will have access to conventional or alternative funds to support the growth of new technology and the digital economy.
Kerajaan bercadang menubuhkan co-investment fund atau dana pelaburan bersama berjumlah 50 juta ringgit untuk melabur bersama dengan pihak swasta melalui platform pembiayaan alternatif seperti equity dana penjanaan masyarakat dan pinjaman terbuka antara rakan setara, iaitu peer-to-peer lending.
Lim further noted that so far, the Securities Commission Malaysia has approved the work frame for P2P and around 170 million ringgit allocation has been generated for 450 companies of various sectors. The Finance Minister added that almost 10,000 individuals, consisting of 45% of investors under the age of 35, have also invested through these alternative financing. Now, the Industry Forward is Malaysia's response to Industry 4.0 and beyond that calls for transformation of the manufacturing sector and its related services to be smarter and stronger, driven by people, process and technology. Under the Industrial Revolution 4.0, the government has outlined 6 measures to establish Malaysia as the hub for advanced technology. Now, among the measures is by providing an allocation of 210 million ringgit for the year 2019 until 2021 to assist businesses, especially SMEs, to improve and move into Industry 4.0.
Perbadanan Produktiviti Malaysia akan menjalankan program Readiness Assessment untuk membantu 500 buah syarikat perusahaan kecil dan sederhana beralih kepada industri atau teknologi Industri 4.0.
Thanks, Mohana. Professor Dr. Raja Rasia still with us in the studio. Professor, the 2019 budget allocates 210 million ringgit for 2019 right up to 2021 to encourage a shift towards Industry 4.0 or forward industry, like what Mohana had just talked about. What are your thoughts about this with regards to growing the digital economy?
I think it's excellent in relation to emphasizing what's coming. It's important that Malaysia catches the wave of competition, and many economies are moving in that direction. It's the technology that is defining the way production, distribution, and consumption is taking place now. But having said that, I'd like to see, perhaps it's there, but I haven't seen yet. One, the notion of Industry 4.0 needs to be extended to the whole economy. We are talking about digitalized control of smart robots that handles milking of cows in Taiwan. Are we doing that here? We haven't even automated harvesting of oil palm. So my feeling is this needs to be taken into account. Second, the way we handle training. We are talking about transferring artificial intelligence to robots. Robots are not only capable of high precision. You can do the best surgery with robots, indeed. But robots also take on artificial intelligence to perform a whole range of things independent of human participation directly there, but with human control from elsewhere.
Correct.
Now, if that's the case, are we looking at that sort of developments here? And that extending throughout, including in services, I expect that to also proliferate into services. That's the last point I'd like to mention in relation to this. We've had, since Tun Mahathir was Prime Minister from the 90s, we've had a huge number of grants for a whole range of high-tech activities. Most of the time, we didn't succeed, and I would like to underline that, because what has happened to our incubators in science parks? We are not comparable in that sense because of the lack of commercialization. We need appraisal mechanisms. What YB Guan Eng is talking about, accountability there.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to pass to Mohana for a moment, Professor, because she's got a question related to Industry 4.0. Mohana, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I do, Professor. I have something interesting came up today during the reading of the budget relating to Industry 4.0. The government has proposed the creation of the Knowledge Resource for Science and Technology Excellence, which will see the sharing of facilities, scientific equipment, and research data with the private sector. Now, as a researcher yourself, what are your thoughts about this, and what kind of impact can we expect?
2 minutes, Prof.
Those things are quite exciting. That also includes the fact that the government is trying to extend the provision of broadband services throughout the country, including the rural communities, so that socio-economic agents, humans of whatever age that they are, they can connect with the knowledge nodes. And in this case, private firms connecting with universities. That's an excellent attempt. But I'd like to see the processes, I'd like to see the steps, the strategies that are put into place, in particular enforcement and appraisal to see that these things happen. Are we talking about 1:1 matching grants, so that the private firm that applies for a grant, and that grant entails the use of machinery and equipment, including scientific equipment in the universities, all that comes together? Are we talking about that sort of a framework? If indeed that's going to happen, that will be great.
Professor, we've got, I think, 30 seconds left or a minute left. I'm getting a cue from the studio. So with all this discussion about digital economy, here's the thing. Is this something that is achievable for us as a nation?
I think if we put our mind to it, we should be able to. We not only have resources within the country, we have quite significant tangible resources abroad. Malaysians who are living abroad, who I can mention firms that have become billion-dollar firms from Malaysians who studied in universities with very small amounts of money. I can also mention leading IT companies led by Malaysians. Kimunda was led by Loh Kin Wah, a Malaysian. So we have all these resources, both from within and from outside. If only we are willing to work together, bring all these Malaysians together and work in the way the budget was presented, we can do it, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's it from us today, and we'd like to thank our Professor Dr. Raja Rasia, Distinguished Professor of International Development at the Asia-Europe Institute, University of Malaya, for joining us today. And that concludes this evening's edition of News on 2. Thanks for watching.